Coffee, Mrs. Olson. Rich and delicious.
He raves about my coffee since I started using Folgers. But you said it was different.
It's a special blend. It tastes best to me. And Folgers is mountain grown. That's the richest, most aromatic kind of coffee.
I think I'll make banana bread next.
Great, but keep making the Folgers.
Mountain grown Folgers. Delicious.
Channel 5, KSTP TV, St. Paul, Minneapolis.
German General Adolf Galland recalls that Hitler didn't like defense. His complete intention was to be offensive, to attack. Could it be then that Hitler's lack of defensive measures led to his and the German downfall? Join us next as film and eyewitness accounts recreate the killing of eagles, the battle over Europe, this week's Big Battle.
No campaign of the Second World War has aroused more controversy or caused as much feeling as the all-out bombing offensive against Hitler's Third Reich. It was the longest battle of the war and one of the costliest in men and material. No one can say with certainty who won. Those who took part will never forget it, and hindsight cannot change what was considered to be the best expedient at the time. The final defeat of Germany was the result of overwhelming military power. And it was power against a German homeland, blockaded, surrounded, and stretched to the limit of its resources, as well as bombed. Each circumstance played its part. This is the story of the bombing and of the great air war that grew out of it. After the ravages of 1940, all Europe had fallen to the Nazis. Only Britain remained, unbeaten, defiant, and powerless. Nothing that Britain possessed could hit back and hurt the enemy, except bombers. In the night skies, the Wellingtons of Bomber Command were pioneering a new offensive. Their aim? The progressive and total destruction of Nazi Germany's war factories, her communications, her cities, and the morale of her people.
I was posted to Bomber Command in November 1940. The War Cabinet had just ordered a sustained air offensive against German industry and communications with the object of fatally weakening their armed resistance. Of course, Bomber Command was much too small for such a task. Fighter Command had just shown that air defenses could defeat a relatively larger force in a good strategic position. And we were expected, with our small force, to succeed against the massive German air defenses. But we all felt that it was a terrific challenge, and we were in good heart.
Goering had boasted that no bombs would ever fall on German cities. To defend his boast, powerful anti-aircraft batteries and strong fighter forces were pitted against the marauding bombers. The skies over Europe became a three-dimensional battleground. German defenses were kept in constant action against the fighter sweeps and medium bomber raids which nibbled at targets of opportunity in occupied Europe. Most attacks were not of sufficient accuracy or strong enough to cripple vital industries. It did not take long for the Royal Air Force to realize that the hazards of using bombers in daylight over enemy territory could not be overcome except at unthinkable cost.
An admiral may fight one or two fleet actions in the course of a war. A general may fight 3 or 4 pitched battles in the course of a campaign. But a bomber commander has to commit his whole force over enemy territory on every suitable occasion, and so it goes on.
For the young pilots and the crewmen of both air forces, the battles that developed nurtured the same skills, the same courage, the same fears.
From 1940 onwards until the end of the war, I was a gunnery leader. First of all, a gunnery leader of a squadron, and then finally of a group headquarters. And in that capacity, I was responsible for the chaps who sat in the turrets in bomber aircraft. The majority of the lads that sat in tail turrets were, many of them, only in their late teens. I suppose the vast majority had joined the Air Force expecting to see exciting action, and it must have been, indeed I know it was a pretty horrifying awakening for them to find that they were in fact destined to sit in turrets, very cold, very frightened, very lonely, sometimes for 6, 7, and 8 hours on end.
Winston Churchill made no secret of his determination to scourge the German nation and diminish their will to fight. It could be done, he believed, through air power, aimed straight at the workers, the factories, the cities, and the people of Germany. The Luftwaffe had left only 2 fighter groups to defend the Channel Coast and the Low Countries. These 200 aircraft were all that Germany could spare. Equipped with the latest mark of Messerschmitt and the formidable new Focke-Wulf fighter, they could claim victory ratios of 3 to 1. It was a hard school. A fighter pilot either became a veteran with a growing score of victories, or he fell after his first few flights. Some of the aces rose high. At the age of 30, one of those pilots became a general and the head of the German fighter defense arm. Adolf Galland was given an insoluble problem.
Germany was in war from the Northern Cape to Africa. By spreading up your forces like this, you cannot concentrate your defense force what really was needed. We were spread up and we had to defend and to attack and to be the defense in the air or the attack in the air on a radius which we could really not cover at this time.
You're selling Glidden Factory?
Paint, selling paint.
Oh.
It's the Glidden Factory sale on spread house paint. $7.99 a gallon.
Is that a big savings?
Tremendous.
Let's see, my house takes about 9 gallons. That's 9 times tremendous. Thanks.
Where you going?
Gonna double my savings, buy a second house.
Remember, only $7.99 a gallon, but hurry.
I'm hurrying.
Glidden, paint you can be loyal to.
From the Mississippi to the Rockies, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf, they're coming. Because they know at this sign, Skelly, they'll find far more than quality gasolines alone. More even than famous Skelly Supreme motor oil. They'll find a commitment to a brand of service over 50 years in the making. So will you. You come.
One sign out of many signs. Welcome to this one.
juicy roast beef and cheese. Arby's is a
fresh, wholesome club sandwich. Arby's is a
hot ham and cheese.
Please, let's all go for a change of taste.
Yeah!
Arby's is a big, juicy, fresh, wholesome, lean, luscious. Arby's is a big, juicy, fresh, wholesome, lean, luscious. Arby's is a big, juicy, delicious change of taste.
Presenting the cold, refreshing mountains of Bush. The mountain, symbol of all the good natural ingredients that go into Bush. Symbol of all the good natural taste that pours out. Always smooth and natural and refreshing. Bush after bush after bush. So don't just reach for a beer. Head for the mountains.
Because of the difficulty in hitting specified targets at night, Bomber Command adopted the principle of area bombing. This method meant that although individual targets might not be hit, considerable destruction would be caused near and around them. War workers living in industrial areas would lose their homes, transportation would be dislocated, and public services disrupted. In this way, all forms of the enemy war effort would suffer damage. It was hoped even more fervently that the morale of the civilian population was being affected. But those who remembered the effect of bombing on London's morale might have wondered in which way. Gradually, German night fighter strength grew and was becoming a serious menace. In the course of 1942, 1,000 bombers had been lost, and aircraft production was having difficulty in reaching the required output.
This was perhaps our worst period in the war, and I was angry and rather despondent. But the darkest hour is just before the dawn. A few weeks later, Sir Arthur Harris arrived to take command. I'd served with him off and on for 20 years or more, and I knew him to be a great commander and a real tiger. He was astonished and depressed to find how little progress we had made during the last year, and realized that something must be done about it. That something was the first 1,000 bomber raid. Harris firmly believed that if we could concentrate a large number of bombers over one target, the result would be so terrific that everything would be changed. When the time came, the weather was bad, but at last it became just possible. We couldn't wait any longer, and Harris gave the order for the attack to take place.
Nearly 1,000 tons of incendiaries were dropped on Cologne. It was estimated that the destruction by fire was 6 times greater than London had suffered during the entire Blitz. Its effect on morale in Britain was invaluable. Now Germany was to reap what she had sown.
One of the odd feelings was that feeling of loneliness, funnily enough. Although one was part of probably anything up to 700, 800 or even 1,000 bombers, you felt that you were just the one aircraft that all the defences were concentrated on.
I often felt that if God had turned on the sun in the middle of a mass raid at night, I should think that practically every aircrew would have bailed out.
I shall never forget that night. Probably the most anxious of my whole life. If the attack failed, the War Office and Admiralty would have had their way. The future of the command would have been divided between North Africa, where the war could neither be lost nor won, and the Battle of the Atlantic, which was purely defensive. If this were to happen, we would lose the only weapon able to strike directly at Germany.
In the sunshine of Casablanca, a troubled Churchill met Roosevelt. British shipping losses had been great, and the constant U-boat menace haunted his thoughts. The bomber offensive had not shown conclusive results. German morale still withstood the calamities that were beginning to assail the Reich. The Russians demanded a second front, and American planners were offering a European invasion within the year. But all the Allies could really offer was the destruction of Germany by bombing. The fateful directive from Casablanca was explicit. The military, industrial, and economic system of Germany was to be destroyed, and the morale of the German people undermined to a point where their capacity for armed resistance was fatally weakened. The Casablanca directive was interpreted by the chiefs of the Allied air forces to conform to their own favored method of operation. General Acre of the 8th United States Air Force saw it as his brief to begin strategic bombing by day with his flying fortresses. For a year, the American Air Force had been building up its strength in Britain and training its crews in the conditions of the European theater of war. Conditions far different from those they had left in the Pacific or at the training establishments in the United States.
Well, 25 years hardly seems a very long time to remember and recall when some of the memories of World War II are so vivid in your mind, even today. We were a very young, aggressive group at the time. The old man, so to speak, being all of 26 years old, directly out of the Pacific from the 19th Bomb Group, and the youngest pilot in the group, 21 years of age. Yet we were an experienced organization, eager, aggressive, and surprisingly, not many of us knew the importance of why we were there.
The daylight air offensive was based on the big punch and firepower of the Flying Fortress. This aircraft, which carried a crew of 10, was considered capable of flying high to its target and defending itself with 12 heavy caliber machine guns. When a group of fortresses flew in a box formation, its firepower was believed enough to beat off any attack. The Norden bomb site was considered the most precise in the world, and it was claimed that the bombers could hit a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. The first tentative raids in daylight were flown against targets in France. German fighters made probing attacks and studied the characteristics of this threatening opponent. Had established the striking power of a 1,000-bomber raid. As the new 4-engine bombers came into service, a greater weight of bombs could be directed against the German cities. Air Marshal Harris had the problem of keeping up the pressure while at the same time avoiding heavy losses.
It has been well said that commanders who cannot sleep do not last. Harris and I managed to sleep, with very few exceptions, because we knew very well that before a raid went off, everything possible had been done to ensure its success. We could do no more, and in fact, the less we fussed and bothered people, the better.
The Germans had over 500 night fighter pilots, whose increasing toll of British bombers created grave problems. One such was Wilhelm Herget, who received the Knight's Cross for bringing down 8 bombers in one night.
When I had to go in my plane, it was a good thing it was dark. My stomach was awfully sensitive. And when I came out to the plane, I disappeared behind the plane. And pity there was not that little house with a heart on the door. You just had to do it in plain air. You just knew you are right, whatever you do, because you were defending your fatherland, Germany. And I think our feeling in Germany was exactly the same what your feeling was when you had to start to fly over Germany. My chief recollection at this rather late period after the war is of rather playing a game, or thinking of it as a game on ops. One put oneself in the place of the German fighters or the German radar people who were tracking you all the way, and they saw you going in a straight line. So you therefore immediately corkscrewed, weaved, lost height, turned 10 or 15 degrees port or starboard, and I flew that way practically from takeoff to target and home again. It was hard work, but at least you felt you were making it more difficult for them. So it was a terrible game always, like playing cat and mouse, but it was very, very serious because life you could lost. The game atmosphere came in again then, because I remember quite distinctly saying to the gunners, now look, I'm going to fly into the old flak bursts. I suppose on the principle that lightning never strikes twice in the same place.
It really was the flak and the searchlights that were the most frightening, particularly the blue master searchlight, which was radar controlled, and once that had locked on to your aircraft, there was no means of getting rid of it other than by getting out of the area. And to sit in a cone of searchlights at 20,000 feet was a pretty naked feeling.
Steak and Ale welcomes you back to the Old Country Inn.
Come sup with us at Steak and Ale, where hearty dining abounds. There's loads of cheer and atmosphere, delicious food to be found.
One thing I know about is the Old Country Inn. It's always been a place to relax and enjoy a good, hearty meal.
Filet for the gourmet, steak marinade, a lobster's luscious tail.
Take it from me, Steak and Ale is bringing it all back home.
Come sup with us at Steak and Ale.
This is Firestone's famous Deluxe Champion Superbelt tire with body plies made of tough polyester, plus 2 belts of long-lasting fiberglass. Its design is intended to give you a long-lasting, smooth ride. Right now, you can get a set of 4. That's right, a set of 4 for as low as $99. A very solid tire, the Deluxe Champion Superbelt, at a down-to-earth price. 4 for $99. Only from Firestone.
My Jeep pickup challenges you guys to take that hill.
Easy,
you got it. Your automatic 4-wheel drive pickups against my Jeep with Quadra-Track automatic 4-wheel drive.
Normal automatic?
Right. The Chevy's losing traction.
The Ford's spinning its wheels.
Afraid the Dodge is slipping too.
Hey, look at the Jeep pickup climb. No trouble at all. Gotta admit it, under these conditions, Jeep's got the best traction.
And best traction means best pickup, huh, guys? See a Jeep dealer for test results that prove who's got the best traction.
Guilty.
No, not guilty. Light and luscious.
Yogurt chiffon from Light and Luscious.
Gotcha.
Got you, Sonny. It's new from Light and Luscious.
New yogurt chiffons from Light and Luscious. Light yogurt chiffon fillings with luscious fruit toppings and only 120 calories a slice. So relax, enjoy, indulge, and feel...
Not guilty. Light and Luscious from Sara Lee.
In July 1943, the Royal Air Force struck at Hamburg in the most devastating attack yet mounted. Tried every means available to confuse the enemy defense. Great success was achieved with the radar blinding use of window. a mass of foil-treated paper strips released to cloud the German radar screens. 700 bombers dropped incendiary and block-busting canisters of high explosive in an operation grimly codenamed Gomorrah. It was frighteningly successful, and a cold chill went through the fiber of Germany following the raging firestorms that consumed 15 square miles of Hamburg's built-up surface. In 4 consecutive attacks, 45,000 men, women, and children perished in the burned-out ruins. American bombers interspersed the night raids with day raids and gave no chance to the fire and rescue services to reorganize. 900,000 refugees fled the city in 2 days, carrying the story of the cataclysm to all parts of Germany. Bomber Command had dropped 9,000 tons of bombs on Hamburg, nearly a quarter of the total dropped the previous year over the whole of Germany. The cost was 87 bombers, and it took the city 5 months to regain 80% of its production. Most disappointing was the fact that the civilian morale had not cracked. German defense leaders saw in the ruins of Hamburg the eventual fate of all German towns. Hitler refused to visit the bombed areas.
Hitler was not a friend of air defense at all. He didn't like defense. His complete intention was to be offensive, to attack. And he did never understand when I tried to make understandable to him that we should first establish a roof over Germany to protect the German production, and then under this roof of air protection start another war productive machinery.
At last, the bombing offensive had a tangible success. German production was switched to fighter planes and home defense weapons. Germany was going over to the defense. As in Britain, the people seemed to gather their resolve through tribulation. It was the turn of the American flying fortresses to strike with precision attacks at the targets specified by the bombing directive. Priorities had already been changed from U-boat yards and pens to the destruction of the German aircraft industry. It was judged that the Luftwaffe was a greater menace to future Allied operations and had to be eliminated whatever the cost. Chief objective of the 8th Air Force bombers was the important ball-bearing works at Schweinfurt and the Messerschmitt aircraft factory at Regensburg. The first formations to Regensburg and avoid the return trip by continuing southward across the Alps and across the Mediterranean to Africa. Almost immediately after, the Schweinfurt force would fly 200 miles into Germany in the hope that the early formations had drawn away the German fighter squadrons, leaving a clear route to the target. The operation would be a direct challenge to the effectiveness of the German fighter defense system. These hopes were cruelly dashed.
Any penetration of our fuel tanks meant that there was insufficient fuel to get to our destination in Africa. This is how closely some of these missions were actually planned. Some of us survived, and it was heartbreaking to see some of our fellow flyers in the squadron with their crews flying in formation, going down into the Mediterranean Sea.
It was a Pyrrhic victory. The fortresses had got through to their target, but at crippling cost. 60 bombers were shot down. A further 100 seriously damaged. Another week of similar operations, and the bomber force would cease to exist.
Presenting more case histories from people who use Trop Arctic all-season motor oil.
My 69 Chevy sits outside winter after winter. It always starts fast using Trop Arctic. Never failed to protect my engine, even pulling a boat in 100-degree
temperatures below zero night after night. We don't choose anything in this cab but Trop Arctic.
It performs no matter what the weather's doing. Trop Arctic from Phillips 66. A great performer from the Performance Company.
Here's Peter and Connie for NSP.
You know, electric use is a lot higher in the summer, especially on really hot, humid days.
So be summer-wise. Try cooking outdoors on those days, so the heat from your range won't overwork your air conditioner.
Install awnings and close drapes and shades on windows where the sun really comes through.
Remember, summer energy use is really high on hot, humid days.
So ask NSP what you can do.
Be summer-wise.
I'm an ortho dealer. And I want to tell you that more than 100 different kinds of insects are about to attack your roses, flowers, trees, and shrubs. This is what you need. Orthene insect spray. It'll wipe out every one of them. It's another great product from Ortho. And who knows more about gardening than Ortho? And me.
Available at Twin City Nursery, True Value Hardware, Hermes Floral, 7 High Coast to Coast Minnetonka, Coast to Coast Bloomington, Frank's Nursery, Cliffs Hardware, Hank, participating Ace Hardware.
Craftsmanship is an old world art seldom seen today, and it's this kind of craftsmanship that Old Style brings to brewing. Old Style is one American premium beer that is still fully krausened, naturally carbonated, the traditional old world way. Because at Old Style, we don't aim to make the most beer, only the best. Try Old Style and taste the difference krausening makes.
Summer of 1943 forced the British and American bombers to pause. Massive losses in aircraft and expensively trained crews had to be made good. In Britain, 40% of war production was now devoted solely to the production of aircraft. More and more sophisticated weapons left the factories of the Ministry of Aircraft Production. The Lancaster bomber, the greatest weight carrier of them all, was being delivered in increasing numbers. The Mosquito, a wooden aircraft, could carry almost the same bomb load as the American Fortress, but at twice the speed. It was uncatchable and deadly. A great proportion of Britain's technological expertise was employed on the bombing offensive against Germany. Specialist electronic and electrical equipment, delicate instruments. In addition, great arsenals manufactured nothing but bombs, high explosives of greater destructive power, delicate fuse mechanisms, and incendiaries.
No major air force can be brought to battle in the air, pinned down and destroyed. It's largely a matter of attrition. And when Bomber Command and the American flying fortresses were fully ready for action, it took more than a year to defeat the German Air Force.
The final test of strength came in October.
I think perhaps one of the most talked about mission of any 8th Air Force mission throughout the entire war was the Schweinfurt mission in October of 1943.
The target, the ball bearing center at Schweinfurt, the scene of the Americans' costly attack in August. It had to succeed.
Most aggressive from the time that we crossed the channel where the Abbeville fighter boys came up after us, Goering's pride and joy.
Between 350 German fighters and the giant American fortresses developed into the bloodiest battle of the air war. The German tactics were daring and resourceful. Head-on attacks with single-engine fighters, while twin-engined rocket-firing fighters broke up the tight defensive formations from the rear. There was no survival for stragglers. You knew that once you were committed to your target, it was flying straight and level, no deviation, no evasive action, dropping your bombs, and then making a very slight turn because you had other people to think of behind you. Bombers were not noted for their violent turns and violent formation flying. It was all straight and level with very minor degrees of change, 3 degrees left and right, trying to avoid the flak as much as possible. One other incident which I think is very important was the fact that we ran into 130-knot headwinds, and this gave us a ground speed of approximately 20 miles per hour. And at 20 miles per hour, it's very difficult to get out of 50 miles of ground radar and gun flak batteries. And also the fighters made it that much simpler to get to us and able to penetrate our formation far more so than if we were doing the usual 150 that we always flew at. The particular hell of the battle over Schweinfurt broke the hopes of the bomber commanders. Veterans and newcomers alike suffered the strain of nerve-wracking hours under constant fire. For some, the ordeal proved too much. A wounded man could lie helpless and beyond reach of help, either to bleed or freeze to death. Some disappeared altogether. The fortresses carried through their mission, but a third of the raiding force was lost. All but 25 of the aircraft were damaged. Shaken, exhausted crews struggled home. They had fought, but no one could tell them they had won. ball bearing production at Schweinfurt was cut by 2/3, but 4 months later, it had all but regained its former level.
It is very difficult for me not to remember 25 years, because in those early missions in Europe, there are 3 very young lads whom were very close to me: my co-pilot, Lieutenant Huser, my bombardier, Lieutenant Roth, and my top turret gunner, Sergeant Tex Blancett, whom are now resting in peace at Cambridge here in England.
The effect of Schweinfurt on Allied morale was serious. Those who failed to return were gone. The wounded and dying were visible evidence of a high price paid.
It's a very difficult thing, and it begins to work on each individual's mind as to whether it's possible to get through such a tremendous ordeal of 25 missions. I was fortunate in surviving these 25 missions and 25 more after that. Fortunate from the standpoint that after my 6th mission, I was an old and experienced pilot, because the majority of the pilots in my squadron had been shot down.
The balance sheet of daylight bombing was scored in red. Schweinfurt decided commanders on both sides of the Atlantic to abandon further missions until a solution to the appalling losses could be found. In Germany, the Luftwaffe had been temporarily encouraged by the scale of night operations grew as Bomber Command expanded. A flow of aircrew was readily available from the overseas training centers, and 1 man in 3 serving in the RAF came from the Commonwealth. Night after night, British bombers continued to eliminate the German cities. Bomber Command found that losses in 1943 had increased disturbingly. In 16 major raids on Berlin, nearly 500 bombers failed to return.
It was the feeling of being hunted yourself. We were often told our aim wasn't to shoot down fighters, it was to get there and deliver the bombs. You were hunted all the way there and all the way back.
We know you had the same feeling as we had. It was hard work for you too. Because, you see, you had the task or the target to find. It was easy in one way because the pathfinders marked the way. But we saw that marking too, it was a very good idea because we had good eyes, and what you have seen we could see too. And of all, if you have seen, for example, a town having been bombed, you couldn't believe that if you wouldn't have seen it with your own eyes.
Germany had nearly 1 million soldiers manning the anti-aircraft guns. The elite groups of the Luftwaffe night fighter arm increased as if in rhythm with its natural enemy. The force created by General Kammhuber was now the most powerful element in the defense of the Reich. The successes scored at night were often greater than those achieved against the daylight raids. Some of the pilots had flown over 700 combat missions in the course of the war. Before he was killed in a night action, Prince Zusein Wittgenstein had scored 83 victories in the dark skies. Other night fighter aces reached totals of over 100. In 4 months of attacks on the Ruhr, the Royal Air Force had lost over 800 bombers, practically the equal of frontline strength. Survival expectancy for aircrew was around 5 out of 100 men for 1 tour. It fell to 2 out of 100 for 3 tours. The Allies had to destroy remaining German strength before they were themselves halted by attrition. Always short of vital raw material, German industry had to salvage every scrap of aluminium. Wreckage of Allied aircraft brought down over the Reich was gathered together in great dumps and all usable items recovered. Nothing was wasted that could be turned into new German fighter planes. Industry had been dispersed over a wide area and production rose to unbelievable levels. Albert Speer, the Minister of War Production, had instituted a defense program that provided 3 times the number of fighters than had been built before the bomber offensive. The Anglo-American 24-hour round-the-clock bombing schedule continued as planned. General Spaatz, head of the United States Strategic Air Force, was certain that the repeated day and night assault in combination with Bomber Command would prove too much for the stretched German resources. The Royal Air Force had over 1,000 heavy bombers available for any target. In Canada, 360 air training schools provided more than 50,000 pilots, a flood of new air crews. The tide sweeping over Germany would be unstoppable.
I love the fresh feeling I get from soap and water. And now I keep that fresh feeling longer with FDS. FDS Feminine Deodorant Spray. FDS has a unique time-release formula that means protection, hour after hour. And FDS helps keep me feeling confident. FDS Feminine Deodorant Spray keeps me feeling soap and water fresh longer than plain soap and water.
Hello, I'm Charo. I want to show you what happens when you take your car to make auto painting and body works. We pound out bumps. We sand the body. We mask the chrome. We make your car sparkle. They let you pick your own color from thousands of choices. And you get your car back fast looking Gucci. So get a quality paint job at Mako.
There are hundreds of Mako locations coast to coast and in Canada. Look for the one nearest you.
I don't think you could pick out the Blatz from the other beer.
Joyce Miller didn't believe the Blatz taste test until she took it herself.
This beer tasted better.
Want to know the one you chose?
I don't believe it.
What is it?
Blatz.
Here's the beer you didn't choose.
Pabst.
Why do you have that funny look on your face?
I just didn't believe I would do that. I picked Blatz when I usually drink Pabst. I believe it, and I believe it's a better tasting beer.
I'm going to name every single television manufacturer who offers a warranty as good as Curtis Mathis. Fact is, nobody else is even close. Curtis Mathis, the most expensive television sets in America, and our warranty is one reason they're darn well worth it.
See your nearest Curtis Mathis Center.
A new factor had entered the battle for air mastery. It was now possible to provide long-range Thunderbolt fighters to escort the bomber formations into Germany. The bloody lessons of unescorted raids had been learned. The Americans undertook the destruction of the Luftwaffe by day. The fighters, by using long-range fuel tanks, could penetrate right to the heart of German resistance. Once the enemy fighter force was enticed into battle and broken, the whole of the Reich would be open to a deluge of bombs. The change in tactics soon handicapped the Luftwaffe defense. When their fighters approached to attack the bombers, they were immediately jumped and forced to engage in costly dogfighting. Bomber losses were greatly reduced. The German fighter units were forced to become more cautious.
The big air battles had been fought before I got over here. I was fortunate, I think, to have flown when we had air superiority, certainly. But like a friend of mine used to say that was flying with us, that well, maybe the big shows were 6 months ago or last week, but they're still not throwing snowballs up there at us. My first group commander over here, Colonel David Schilling, He said, Keeler, the most expendable thing we have over here is wingmen. And you're going to be a wingman most of your tour over here. And he was right. We lost a lot of wingmen.
Galland, the fighter pilot's general and an outspoken critic of the war leadership, found himself in disfavor. Goering had lost Hitler's confidence and blamed events on his subordinates.
I had a very big argument always with Goering of being responsible for the German fighter force, and he was always arguing about the bravery, about the spirit of attack.
No matter how willing, the German Home Defense Force was hopelessly overcommitted. It had to meet the increasing American attacks with technically inferior machines that had seen their best days. The veterans sensed their fate in the lengthening Allied vapor trails high over Germany. There was no shortage of volunteers, and thousands of young men were still eager to fly. For the great majority, the adventure was brief. The fledglings were destroyed at a greater rate than they could be trained. Not only the novices fell in the bitter battles that raged. The unit commanders and veterans were rapidly being eliminated.
Nobody can blame that this fighter arm did not do his duty in such a situation. That's impossible.
I think the fact that we would catch the German fighter pilots in the traffic patterns at times, when we were on the rodeos, the fighter sweeps ahead of the bombers, and that we would catch them many times doing stupid things, such as failing to release their drop tanks, certainly indicated that we were fighting an inferior German pilot in 1944, certainly inferior to the type that they were putting up in the year before.
The final blow came when the Mustang long-range fighter appeared. This machine was the result of combining a British Rolls-Royce engine and an American airframe.
And the range of the Mustangs was not even limited by reaching Berlin. They could reach Leipzig, Middle Germany, and they could even go over Germany and land in the Russian base.
It proved to be the supreme instrument of air mastery in the Battle of Germany. With its long range and superior performance, it could roam at will through German skies. The extent of the daylight battle became enormous. Using its technical and numerical advantage, the American Air Force went all out to destroy the remaining enemy fighters wherever they could be found. The German hunters had now become the prey.
Of course, they had their ace in the hole, the German jet, Messerschmitt 262. And I remember we dove on this aircraft, and it was below us, and he started to climb, and he was climbing faster than we were diving in those Thunderbolts. And that's quite a feat, because there wasn't much that could outdive a Thunderbolt.
The final attempt to stave off the overwhelming Allied air superiority was the construction of a jet fighter, the most advanced design yet seen in the air war. In spite of relentless bombing, the German aircraft industry had managed to produce over 1,000 machines. It could hardly affect the outcome of the war, but it severely shook the Allied Air Command. Now, when it was too late, the Luftwaffe began to re-equip their remaining forces with technically outstanding weapons. Another radical approach was the use of rocket-powered fighters. These dangerous little machines were placed around vital oil and production centers. Their disadvantage was limited range and an endurance of but a few minutes. They were also tricky to fly, and the volatile fuel made it a serious risk for the pilot. When the fortresses were sighted, they hurtled vertically up to the attack. Their enormous speed protected them from interception, and they counted on knocking down a bomber in one pass. No amount of ingenuity or desperate improvisation could forestall the Allied superiority. The Allied armies were on the continent and closing ever nearer to German soil. The entire length and breadth of the Reich was open to the American and British air forces. The fighters of the Royal Air Force could now join battle by flying from European bases. The Germans were caught on the ground. Low-level attacks destroyed the bulk of the remaining opposition. Ironically, German aircraft production reached its peak in the autumn of 1944, but most of it was lost in strafing and bombing raids on airfields where the machines were awaiting fuel and pilots, both in critical supply. The attacks against the transportation and fuel targets of the enemy military machine proved the fatal blow. Germany was like a huge shooting gallery, and anything that looked as if it carried fuel was attacked. The German night fighter force, which was enjoying a degree of success against the RAF night bombers, found itself caught on the ground by day and severely reduced from further operations. Allied long-range tactical fighters had made the skies safe for the heavy strategic bombers. Air mastery was finally won. The Americans could put up 2,000 bombers daily, and the RAF over 1,000. City after city reeled under the rain of bombs. Berlin, Hamburg, and Dresden, where more people died in one night than at Hiroshima. Lancasters of Bomber Command flew by day deep into Germany and bombed Hitler's Eagle's Nest in the Alps. It was a symbolic gesture of victory. The cost of the air war over Germany was enormous. Royal Air Force Bomber Command lost 50,000 aircrew killed in action, 67% of total British air casualties. The American Air Force lost nearly 80,000 airmen. 9,000 heavy bombers had been shot down. 1.5 million tons of bombs had fallen. Germany was laid waste. Over 300,000 civilians were dead. Most of the major cities lay in ruins, and nearly 8 million people were homeless. Both sides seemed stunned after the event. No one can say to this day how the balance sheet of the strategic bombing campaign reads. Whether the vast expense of industry, of technology, of treasure, of human life achieved what the Allied leaders hoped. But the courage and dedication of the crews who fought the lonely battles of the sky is without question. It won the admiration of surviving German airmen who shared their agony and raised a monument to those eagles of all the warring countries who died in the skies over Germany.
The battle you have just seen was one of the decisive battles of the Second World War, a war that affected the destinies of men and nations the world over. The film you have just witnessed was discovered in film libraries all over the world and painstakingly edited to show you the incredible impact these individual battles had on the outcome of this most devastating of wars. The world, thanks to these films, will never forget the tremendous effort put forth by all people included in the big battles.
Follow Following the invasion of Sicily, Mussolini is arrested and succeeded by Marshal Pietro Badoglio. Badoglio begins immediate negotiations with the Allies. Learning of Mussolini's downfall, Hitler realizes that if Italy is no longer his ally, it must become an occupied country. Join us next Sunday as The Big Battles presents the Battle of Italy, the Axis Broken.
Hi, you want to buy a S-E-I-T-Z? What's S-E-I-T-Z? Come on, I'll show you. See? It looks like bologna to me. It is. I just love to eat bologna sandwiches. S-E-I-T-Z. I can't tell you how good they are. Tell me how good they are. I can't. S-E-I-T-Z. Spell bologna.
This coming Tuesday on Twin Cities Today, we are featuring a special broadcast brought to you from Lake Nokomis.
We're going to take a look at some very special beach fashions.
And we have some special ideas on outdoor cookery.
Also an amateur boat building contest.
So join us at 9 a.m. for Twin Cities Today from Lake Nokomis on Tuesday.
That's Hollywood, Tuesday at 6:30 on Channel 5.
Channel 5, KSTP TV, St. Paul, Minneapolis.